Not Colorado.
No.
No.
West Coast.
West Coast. Okay, right. Yeah, Central. Oh, you're up near Bay Area, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah, I was
Further
thinking
east. Sacramento.
Sacramento. I was gonna say.
Hi, Eric.
Eric, you may be muted at the moment.
Yeah, he is.
I was saying it was sort of like with Mary, it was like a game of hot and cold, getting closer, getting closer.
Yeah, right.
Hello, everybody. Good to see familiar faces.
I know. Let's see, Lydia, where are you located? I forget.
Canada.
Toronto.
Toronto. Hi, Angus.
All right, couple more coming in here. Just give us a second, guys. Get their audios. You know, it takes a half a second for the audios to, connect and go, yeah, we got you. Let's see, Caitlin's in Southern California. Angela, if you're there, where are you connecting from? And some people can text in too, or use the Zoom. And Angela says in Florida. Fantastic.
I'm going to say this meeting almost didn't happen because like 15 minutes ago, it said on Facebook only 3 people attending, and that was me, Bradley, and Angus.
Yeah. That's the way
maybe this isn't the day to do it,
because they don't think about like RSVPing. Inauguration, you have to RSVP. Here, like it's a courtesy, but we're not buying steaks for everybody. So, hey Siri, turn on face light. Hey Siri, turn on face light, please. She don't want to do it.
She didn't RSVP yet.
Oh, she says it's on, but I know it's not true. Oh, all right. Okay, so listen, we got 5 minutes after. Let's see if there's anybody else in the. I'll let them in. Let's see. Okay, so Angus. Okay, great. So listen, folks, what we're gonna do is I'll drive the participation on who's on first. And Angus will take the helm in just a second. Everybody is muted, and Eric is going to be speaking and presenting. And when he does, like say he wants your feedback or he wants to talk to you, obviously lunge for your space bar if you've got that set up. Otherwise, come on in. But if you have stuff going on in the background, that'll help us to focus on the stuff. We automatically record our meetings. And let's see here. I'll spotlight me for half a second. We automatically record our meetings, and we post them later. And we had been in the past streaming it straight into Facebook. And Angus, I don't know if we're doing that today, but that capability allows people, even if they're not here, they can watch. But it's better when you're here because we like to see you and like to know you're participating. So anyway, with that, we are so excited to have our guest speaker today. Eric is going to be speaking in just a moment, and I will ask Angus to introduce him. And look at that, with people, there you go. Yeah, I like that.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Perfect. All right. I would like to take just a few minutes and introduce Eric. We are super excited, and Eric and I were first introduced online about a month, 6 weeks ago, something like that, through just a Facebook comment. And then we started communicating from there. And I had several people reach out to me and ask me to invite him to be a guest speaker on our call. So we've been really looking forward to this for a while. And so just going to read a little bit of Eric's information here. Eric is a trainer of MER, mental and emotional release, NLP, hypnotherapy, and a moderator of the TEP Master Prac and Trainers Alumni Facebook group. He is also a level 4 practitioner of HUNA and an integrative NLP coach. Eric's the author of the book, Change the One Belief, The Magic of Mental and Emotional Release, with foreword by Dr. Matt James. He launched his hypnosis service in 2011 and experienced a boom in his practice after completing Master Prac in 2014. He now has one of the highest rated practices in the country. A key factor in his success was his streamlining of the breakthrough session into a more conventional format spread over several meetings. And that's actually one of the main things that we're going to be asking him to talk about today. His website, badassrising.me, focuses on rapid mindset makeovers for people who want to move into the C-suite. Please join me in welcoming Eric Rosen to the NLP Master Prac community for today's presentation. Streamlining breakthrough session
Hey.
through business model.
Thank you, Angus.
My pleasure.
So I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to bring up, let's see here. Can I do screen sharing yet?
Should be. Let me just check that real quick and make sure you can. Should be able to. Let me click on this right here. More allow. Well, I don't know why not, unless that's been disabled. Let's see, participants, security. You should be able to. Let's just do one thing real quick. I'm gonna unspotlight you for just a second.
Okay.
And come back to this view. And where are you? I see you right here. Then I'm going to make you a host, and then I know you can.
Okay.
I don't see co-host in there, Angus.
It's so funny because the reason I made you the full host is because I didn't see co-host in there either.
Yeah, exactly. That's it may be part of the setup there. Eric, so just check that out real quick. You
Okay.
may...
Now it's now allowing me.
Okay, great.
Okay.
And would you also spotlight your video?
What do you mean by spotlight?
I think you just right click on your picture and then say spotlight video, and that way your picture.
Okay. All right, one moment. Let's see. So, and spotlight myself. There we go. Spotlight for everyone. Okay.
All right. How's it look for everybody? I'm seeing him. I'm seeing his screen full screen, and I see him off to the right. Great. Thanks, Lauren. Okay, you're good.
All right, let's get started. Well, thank you, Angus, for that lovely introduction. And so this is streamlining the breakthrough session to revamp your business model. This is something I've lived for the last, it's coming on 6 years now. And this is the first time I've ever kind of tried to pull it all together and put it into words for other people. So this should be fascinating. I think we'll need about 45 minutes, not including Q&A. I hope that works okay for folks. All right. And I won't be looking at the chat because I want to keep this full screen so I see the material in as large and easy to look at format as I can. So let's continue.
And not to interrupt, but we did have, because I had to make you the host, if you wouldn't mind, take a look and see, we might have one or more people still in the waiting room, and you could let them in if they're there.
You want me to hold up? I'll hold up.
Yes, it would be if you could either click on participants or pass.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah, I see that just came up.
Look and see if you see anybody in the waiting room, and you
all.
let them in. Yeah. There's a setting that has to do with the ability to pass who the presenter is, and we did not get that set up ahead of time, so forgive us for that, but thanks for doing a great job.
All right, so hopefully we have everybody now and we can get started. And so, all right, welcome everybody to Streamlining the Breakthrough Session to Revamp Your Business Model. This grew out of necessity when I came out of Master Prac in 2014. And I'll tell more about that story with slides as we go. And let's get started. And so A little about me, in case you didn't hear Angus's introduction. I'm a trainer of MER, NLP, and hypnotherapy. I'm the author of this book here called Change the One Belief, The Magic of Mental and Emotional Release. Dr. Matt was kind enough to write the foreword. I'm a moderator in the Master Prac and Trainers Alumni Facebook group, Level 4 HUNA practitioner. I call myself a transformation coach. I'm trained in the integrative NLP way of TEP. My private practice was started in 2011. My focus is on something called core identity, and what that'll make a lot more sense to you later on in this presentation. I would say my experience now is with about 800 clients, and I'm probably closing in on 3,000 MER sessions. And could never be that high a number of MER sessions had I not streamlined the breakthrough session. So that'll make sense shortly. Just a quick few operating agreements. Let's stay on mute unless you have a question. And then there'll be these designated Q&A modes along the way. So please hold your questions until we're in Q&A modes. And chances are your question will get answered along the way. And I encourage you to participate in a poll, like a one-question survey I'll have at the end. And let's get our terms and abbreviations established, because there's a lot to convey here. And without abbreviations, we would need more screens. And I wanted to keep the screens to a minimum. So BTS means breakthrough session. CMUM is conscious mind, unconscious mind. C and V means criteria and values. Little s, BTS means streamlined breakthrough session. DPH means detailed personal history. GP means the greater problem, which I like to call the core identity belief. If you've ever attended David Shepard's masterclass for master practitioners, in England, they call it the linchpin. I love that term. And then you may have all heard of something called the hero's journey. I'll be mentioning that occasionally as we go. And just a few more abbreviations. LB, LD, limiting belief, limiting decision. NE is negative emotions. P number, I have what I call the philosophies of my practice. And this is sort of like the presuppositions of NLP. And so we'll see how that plays in. PI would mean parts integration. SMD, BC would mean submodality belief change. VL would mean value ladder, and people in marketing might call that a funnel. And for our purposes today, we'll call it a business model. And WIFM, the famous radio station, what's in it from me? Of course, that's from your perspective or your client's perspective. And I'd like to think that these are some intentions we share as to why we've come together today. One is to build your confidence to grow your practice in a big way. And that there's going to be a lot of transfer of knowledge and experience. And because that's the nature of what we're doing today, we probably won't have much room for anything hands-on. It just kind of doesn't fit the nature of the subject, at least not with the time we have. For our focus on why, in other words, I'll always explain things in a way that's to your WIFM when we introduce a subject. And when we get into the content, I'll point out where I can the risks, the remedies, and the rewards of streamlining the breakthrough session. And we'll always have these Q&A modes where we can get into some what-if questions. And I'd like to think that that will promote creative thinking and perhaps substitute to some degree for no hands-on kind of experience with this. And so what are we looking at today? We're going to cover why would you streamline the breakthrough session? What are the philosophies of the practice? The breakthrough session as its own standalone business model. There are some risks with that. There are some rewards. What is the traditional breakthrough session structure? That'll be a fast review for all of you. And I can get that down to one slide, believe it or not. And how do you then take the existing traditional structure and make it a multi-session structure? You haven't yet streamlined it, but we're going to step through that so it makes more sense for us to talk about how do we pare down the breakthrough session into a streamlined breakthrough session. And then we'll look at some different options for streamlined breakthrough sessions as a multi-session offering. And then finally, how that can change your existing business models. So why would you streamline the breakthrough session? Well, it's always a good thing to be able to diversify your offerings. And of course, as you diversify your offerings and they're not this big honking, 8-hour thing, you have perhaps a lot more opportunities to get more gigs. And when you get more gigs, you serve more people. And of course, when you serve more people, you hone your skills. And when you hone your skills, you raise your rates. Some of you might remember that little sound effect from a certain rock song. Anyway, so philosophy of the practice. What are these kind of presuppositions? Number one, this is by far the most important, though they're not necessarily in any special order. The client must leave your office emotionally better than they came in. And when you start breaking apart the breakthrough session into more than one sitting, that becomes a very big issue. I'd like to say better pre-framing leads to better outcomes. A more accurate grade of problem can compensate for someone not being the best at MER. Your reputation precedes you. Transformation, not treatment. Now, for some people who may be in a licensed field, this one might not be something that they could utilize in their own practice. It may differ, I don't know. But I'm a hypnotherapist. I'm not licensed by the state, so I'm not required to do things on a pay-as-you-go basis after the delivery of the service. So transformation, not treatment, that gets into salesmanship as much as anything else. And we'll talk about where salesmanship comes into the process. And just a few more here. A committed client is better than having a lot of clients. So fewer committed ones. And getting them committed is where tasking or deals are something that maybe the licensed professional could utilize, where making an upfront investment is not an option for them. But if you can, an upfront investment can be an ordeal. And so it's part of tasking. Keep everything results oriented. I'll show you ways that we can do that streamline the detailed personal history, which is one of the big consumers of time in this process. Sessions with me typically range, and I pre-frame this when I at the first get acquainted call, that my sessions are flat fee. They're not based on the clock. So they're anywhere from 1 to 2.5 hours. And I say to them, the reason we want it that way is because I'm not a clock watcher, and the last thing we want is tick-tock of the clock getting in the way of your results. And you want to prevent something called scope creep. Are folks familiar with scope creep? Is that like a common term? If you ever get into advanced project management, scope creep means that somehow, while the project is being executed, it's trying to accomplish more than what the original scope called for in the documents that got the project established. And so I like to say that human wants and needs are insatiable. So unless you have clear results that they've put in writing at the outset, you could get them their results, and then they're on, oh, I really want this instead. And you may never be able to hit the scope that makes them happy. So if they can really, if you can give them guidance on how to express what will make them love the work you've done with them up front and then put it in writing, not only do you prevent scope creep, but you make them very happy too. So it works as a win-win. And then have no fear of refunds. And I don't know, it might be different if you're licensed, but I have policies that are very generous about that. And guarantee your work. And again, in my case, I call it a lifetime service guarantee. And there's a page on my website about it that says, in the unlikely event of a relapse for any reason, I will make myself available for up to a full 2-hour session, up to 1 time per month for a lifetime, until such issue is definitively dissolved. That can be the difference maker to get someone sitting on the fence to come into the practice. And of course, I love to say to them, if I had to use it a lot, well, then I couldn't keep the lights on, right? That's the economic reality. And they laugh, and it gives them that extra assurance that they might need to make the commitment. Okay, so then does anyone have anything they want to share? Any questions about why we would streamline the breakthrough session or the philosophies of the practice? If not, we can move forward. It sounds like a move forward. Okay. All right, so the breakthrough session as a business model, there are some rewards. All right, and value ladder, again, kind of means funnel or business model. It can be a good mid-level offer. It could be a good high-end offer. Of course, it tends to be priced at a higher level, so more revenue for you. And it'll differentiate you, no doubt about that, because there's no way that that the market is ever going to get saturated for this. This will never be embraced by, I think, mainstream psychology, because after all, we're getting into past lives. That's just a little too woo-woo, and that works to our advantage. And you get a person amazing results, and that's very word of mouth friendly, and people will bust through walls to get in touch with you. Okay, so this is where it's my story. Coming out of Masterprac, November 2014, did the 2 weeks there. And at the time I was doing about 60% hypnotherapy practice for about 3 years, and about 40% marketing copywriting, salesmanship with the written word. And so I could appreciate that the breakthrough session is a very difficult sell. And that kind of freaked me out a little bit, because people have no frame of reference for it. It's an unheard of format. They don't know anybody who's done it. So it's kind of like being alone on a tumbleweed highway. And they may be of a pre-existing mindset. Oh, well, change has to take years and years, right? So they got that skepticism, and that's natural. And so, their logical conscious mind is going to give them every reason that they think this is impossible, because we're making these bold promises. And they might ask, well, why isn't this mainstream? And I just gave that answer a little while ago. But even then, you never know your client. You might not be able to bring into the conversation the concept of past lives yet. It may be way too premature. And of course, the high investment, they don't want to be in the red. And so that could trigger a scarcity mindset, which would then be, in my experience, that's really a smokescreen for other objections, but it can exacerbate those concerns that they have. And then, of course, let's face it, there can be difficulty scheduling. It's a long sitting, and they may have family and work obligations, and they just can't get away for the expansive time that it would be ideal. And so now, does anyone have any questions about the business, rather the breakthrough session as the business model in terms of the rewards, the risks? Anyone have any questions about that? Anything I need to know? Okay, cool. Let's continue.
Sorry, Eric, it took me a minute to unmute. You may be coming to it, so just tell me if you are, but at some point, can you tell us a little bit about how you came about your price point when you started, and like where it's moved to over time for these?
That would probably be a really good question to answer when we go at the very end. There'll be like an overall Q&A.
Okay.
So I would recommend holding it to them, because once you've come across everything else in the presentation, whatever answers I make will probably make a lot more sense, because they'll be in context.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, so let's have our one screen refresher of the whole traditional breakthrough session. How do you get it all onto one slide? Well, I'm a big fan of something called mind maps. And I'm going to give you some extra time to look at this because it could be a bit of a squint. All right, so look at this closely. Now with mind maps, you may see that there's a node that has a little circle at the bottom of it, like where it says intervention. That means the node has child nodes. And if you click on that parent node, the child nodes get exposed. All right, so we'll start here with, this comes right out of the manual. Before the session, I call them starter questions, those questions you might ask before you actually have a sit-down meeting. And in that time, you might assign an ordeal. And then when it comes time to actually begin the session, you do the rest of the questions in the detailed personal history, you elicit their values, and then you set the frames, right? Set the outcomes, frames for therapy, and describe the requisites for change. All right, now let's close up the ones on top and open up the first of the intervention parent nodes. And this is about half the steps involved in doing the intervention. All right, so you MER their negative emotions away. You check, is the greater problem gone? And then, you know, you guys could read this. You don't need me to narrate it, but I just want to have you able to see what's there before I move on. And then, of course, we go to the second of the intervention parent nodes. And of course, you re-elicit or optimize their values hierarchy, check for ecology or conflicts. This is then comes hypnosis and pendulum work. You could future pace them, revisit their evidence procedures, check that you're really done based on your detailed personal history, set the future goals using SMART. And then if we click one more time, then what we have here is the completing the session and follow up for later. And people have different models. You know, maybe they'll do a certain number of coaching calls to make sure everything sticks, right? In terms of your progress. So that's how we got the whole traditional breakthrough session onto a single slide. And so we'll be using a lot of mind maps here to get a lot of info across in a compact way. And I'll keep it slow so that you have the opportunity to make sure you're taking it all in. What I love about mind maps is that you can see the forest and you can see the trees kind of at the same time. All right, so now let's talk about how do you make the traditional breakthrough session into a multi-session offering without streamlining it. Okay, so let's say we're going to do it in 2 sessions. All right, so session 1, it would be all your before the session stuff, and it would be your take the detailed personal history. So you could combine all that. Now there's a risk. There's a very important risk here. When they come out of the detailed personal history, they may feel very bummed. And if they're in a bummed out mode, well, that violates philosophy number 1. They must come out of your office in a better emotional state than they went in. They might not show up. They may ask for their money back. Whatever the case may be, you've got to have that remedy going in. So what are those remedies? 1, if you were able to secure a big upfront investment, that's great. That helps. If you were able to assign them an ordeal and they already took action on the ordeal, forget whether they successfully did it or not. At least you got them to take the action. That too will go a long way towards mitigating any risk in breaking up the breakthrough session. If you have an arrangement with them, a lot of folks will say, if we don't mutually agree on the greater problem at the end of the detailed personal history, I'll refund you what you already invested. And if we do agree, you'll make the rest of the investment. Well, you better secure the rest of that investment right then and there before they have time for that negativity to fester. All right, because then it keeps them committed. Now, what are some fun things we can do to mitigate this? Right out of prac, you could do a like to dislike either before or after you do the detailed personal history. And when they're blown away that they no longer want potato chips, well, that gets rapport with the unconscious mind. That gives them a sense that things are going to be okay. And it's fast and it's easy for you to do, and it's fun. And that builds rapport with your client. And of course, you could do something else a little more esoteric, like perceptual positions, right? Where it's just sort of like 1/3 of what makes MER, where it's all about, are you associated or are you dissociated? And does that issue or that event bug you anymore? And you could teach them how to do it. And now they've got a tool they can walk away with so that they're feeling that much more empowered, and they're leaving your office in a better emotional state than when they left. And looking at session 2, it's just the remainder of the breakthrough session. So all the stuff we described on that one slide is here. All right, so we don't need to kind of drill on that. Now let's say, how would we make the breakthrough session into 3 sessions? Well, session 1 could be the same as what we just described. Session 2 could go about halfway or a little more than halfway through the intervention, right? You start with the listening values, and you get to testing all the negative emotions, revisit the evidence procedure, can they still run it, and release anything else. And then session 3, I think a nice place to start is once again with values, just like you did in session 2, and you could take it the rest of the way. So you still have that risk between sessions 1 and 2. You don't want progress to unravel. And the remedy, another remedy is to keep the time in between sessions 1 and 2 as short as you possibly can. Especially if you weren't able to secure an upfront investment of any size, or if you decided to do tasking instead of an ordeal. The difference being that the tasking comes after the intervention and the ordeal comes before it. So any questions about the traditional or the multi-session breakthrough session options?
Yeah, Eric, I'll throw in a question here.
Yes.
I love this. This is super and exactly on point for what we were hoping. Would you do anything hypnotically at the end of a session to send them out kind of in a positive frame?
Why not? Why not? We'll be talking about, when we streamline things, that one of the ones you can kind of streamline out or keep in is that hypnosis pendulum piece. And you could use it strategically. And we'll look at that right after the next couple of slides, I think. All right, so how do we streamline the traditional breakthrough session? And that means that we have to be willing to pair a few things off. And what you can then do is let the traditional breakthrough session be your mid-level offering. And what we're doing here is coming up with the streamlined breakthrough session as an entry-level offering. So here's the whole breakthrough session again in one slide. And now the way to look at this mind map is to go from the lower left corner clockwise up into the right lower corner. All right, so think of it as a clockwise display. And anything that's red could be saved for the higher level offering that I'll show you as we move through this in the program I use, that you don't necessarily have to go very deep into values. All right, values is necessary when you want to hold someone accountable to some accomplishment out in the world. A lot of people who would come in for this entry-level program, they just want to get a monkey off their back. They just want to get to a better place emotionally, and they're not necessarily looking for coaching. All right, so that makes the values candidates to be sheared away here. The assignment of tasks, again, you could do that up front with the ordeal. If I find in my practice, it's the exception, not the rule, that we need tasks, because they want the monkey off the back. But I do get a fair bit of people who will say, is there any homework I can do? And of course, I will accommodate them. And of course, scheduling and follow-up, that's going to be built into a 4 or 5 session program anyhow. All right, and how we keep that results oriented is something we'll be looking at. Now, the ones in yellow are, I can't say that they're yellow for number 3 and number 18 for the same reason. The detailed personal history can take 3 hours. Anything we can do to get the full value of a detailed personal history and streamline it down to a lot less time will keep the total number of sessions fewer and still give you this modular entry-level offering that people can get their heads wrapped around. It doesn't seem so radical to them. And the yellow for hypnosis and pendulum is that we could include it, we could shear it out if we don't have time for it. And it can do well in either case. And I'll explain how as we go.
Can I ask you a question there?
Yes. And
So-
I'm not sure how to make this go backwards, by the way. Because like it used to be, if I hit the left, oh, the left arrow will do it. Okay. All right, go right ahead.
So remind me, I understand the red is, we can just eliminate it for the pared down offering. What's the yellow? How did you describe that?
Yellow means they're, okay, in the case of the detailed personal history, it's like a prime candidate for streamlining.
Okay.
We're not, in other words, we cannot eliminate it in spirit, but we can eliminate it in the letter.
Okay. So you're going to essentially show us a way to shorten that
Yes.
dramatically.
And it's like the biggest time sink that we have in the whole process.
Right,
So
right.
it's a prime candidate.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
And the hypnosis pendulum, it's kind of like, it can be a must, it can be a nice to have, and you can play it by ear.
That makes sense, because actually, if I think back to my breakthrough session, after the breakthrough session and the first elicitation of values, we took a break, and by the second day, it was like I didn't even need to do the hypnosis or anything. Like enough stuff had shifted where it was like I didn't even need to go through any of that. I think they were helpful, but there wasn't a necessity for it.
Yeah, I'm just looking for like an easy opportunity to pare things down.
Okay.
Okay. Absolutely.
I
And
have a question.
Yes, who's talking?
Hi, this is Anne. I just had a question. What is the difference between the price point of the entry level and the higher level with the hypnosis and pendulum?
Well, that's what it was. Can you repeat the question? When you said price point, I got a little confused.
Right. So if someone paid for the entry level MER, how much would that be? And then how much would it be at the higher level? Like, what's the difference in price? Like 20%,
Oh, okay. Well,
25%?
that's going to vary. That's going to vary with the practitioner. It depends how far along you feel you are, how confident you are to ask for your full value. And your question is very similar to Angus's, and we will come back to, I'll be happy to answer that in my case, and once you've seen what my entry level streamlined breakthrough session looks like, you'll have the context, and you'll also see the rest of my value ladder. And then that question could get answered much more contextually.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. So now a streamlined breakthrough session, you see, I put in there 5/6. What does that mean? I like to say there's such a thing as session 0. And session 0 is your get acquainted call. And that can be, some people would automatically or reflexively think of it as being a sales call. And I think it can do a lot of therapy as well. And I'll be sharing about that because that becomes a prime mover for paring down the detailed personal history. Okay, so it's in this example, we're going to look at a 5-session program with a session 0 at the front end. All right, so this is streamlining, and the session 0, you could have your get acquainted sales call. On that call, you could assign an ordeal, and then you could assign the starter questions. And if you front load them to have them do it by email or a form on your webpage, well, you took the, then what you've done is you've made session 1 take less time, right? Because you front loaded stuff and they're doing it on their own time. And so then with session 1, it would be, take the detailed personal history. All right, so session 0, again, let's review. You can set up frames for therapy. You can assign an ordeal. You can get your upfront investment if that's apropos. You can front load your starter questions as much as possible. Now let's look at session 1. So again, the detailed personal history, risks and remedies still apply coming out of that detailed personal history. And with session 2, you can get to the point of releasing anger and sadness with MER. I like to say it leaves their body neutral. Matt has said anger is a stimulant to the body and sadness is a depressant. And so it sounds good to them. Yeah, I'll come out body neutral, And so, again, this is a way to come at this where it's front end 0 and 5 paid sessions. And again, that session 0 could be lengthy. And so, and you're doing it gratis or free of charge. That too is going to build rapport, by the way. So now we're looking at session 3, and you could release fear, hurt, guilt, the limiting belief, limiting decisions, anxiety, check if their greater problem or core identity belief is gone, eliminate any other limiting decisions. And that's a serious session, right? You've done quite a bit of work. And then we look at session 4. And I like to say, if you get the greater problem spot on and your MER is effective, the chances of needing to do a parts integration is very low. And that's why I put it in red here. So that might save you some time. But if it's needed, you got to do it. But now you see, here's where we can take or leave the hypnosis pendulum piece. All right. If, for example, let's say you did not need to do a parts integration in this session 4, and it might seem like you had nothing to offer here. So you could do a full-on hypnosis here to flesh out all of the work you've already done. All right. And then you could future pace them, which means you can do SMART goals, or, those two, hypnosis and future pacing SMART goals, are things, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's just say you future pace them. So that's the option in session 4. And again, you can reinforce all the progress you've made. Now, session 5, if you had to do a serious parts integration in session 4, well, maybe you didn't have time to do the hypnosis in that session. So now you could bring it into session 5. All right, and again, reinforce all the work you've done so far. Then you can get into SMART goals. And the thing I love about SMART goals is when you create their vivid future memory of success and you want to put that up on the timeline, the time where you spend creating that vivid future memory, you could really make it totally hypnotic and really go to town on that. Got to remember the unconscious mind. This is something I pre-frame on the Get Acquainted call. The unconscious mind cannot tell the difference between events you've lived, movies you've watched, and dreams you've had. They're equally real. So as long as we say, okay, let's make that vivid future memory of success vivid and vibrant, high resolution, high definition, well, then that's as real to your unconscious mind as anything you've ever lived. So really, flesh that out. Go to town on it before you put it up on their timeline. All right, so that's basically what I just said. All right. Now, what if we could pare it down even further, streamline it even more, get it so that you have the session 0, Get Acquainted call, and then you have 4 paid sessions. How do you make that happen? So session 0 is still session 0. However, if you can, you could combine finding the greater problem with your intervention to get to the release of anger and sadness. And this is what I was doing coming out of Master Prac. This is like early 2015, where I was just, using my instincts and my previous experience with hypnosis and conversational hypnosis, and sort of memorizing the MER scripts and memorizing aspects of the detailed personal history, and just figuring out a way to kind of get these things streamlined, blended together. It may be at this stage kind of difficult for people to do. I will be the first to admit that. All right, but that's the key to getting the number of sessions down, is if you can get to the greater problem sooner. Because again, if we can get there in an hour or less instead of 3 hours, so much the better. And this brings in one of my philosophies of the practice, 6.1. We have variable session durations at a flat fee so that we maintain our results orientation, like I had mentioned earlier. Well, this is, part of what came out of these experiences, came these philosophies. And like anything else, the more detailed personal histories you do, the faster you can get through them, although you never know, you get someone who is a challenging client and that could throw you back to stage one. It does happen. And now what I've used to get that detailed personal history streamlined to the greatest degree I think imaginable is a hypnotic regression where I have them go back to the day of their birth and preview their life as if it were a 4-act play. And we'll talk more about that 4-act play because it'll be very familiar to you. It's also, I metaphorically refer to it as the hero's journey. And it's enabled me to cut the detailed personal history from 3 hours to 30 minutes. All right, and so we'll elaborate on this in a little while. And that means that from this point on, the other sessions are the same as what we just described on the previous offering, where it would be 5, 6, but now we've made it 4, 5. So does anyone have any questions about this streamlining of the breakthrough session so far?
I do have, this is Lydia. What is reasoning on breaking the MER in 2 sessions?
Oh, because there's so much setup involved, right? You have to do prime directives of the unconscious mind, and you've got to show them the diagram of MER and explain all these concepts. There's so much setup work before you do the release of anger and sadness. And again, I'm a big proponent of setup as pre-framing, as rapport building, as conversational hypnosis. All right, so we're putting our energies in the place where they're going to have the biggest payoff.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense. Entire pre-framing can also be done first session,
Yes.
via email and so on, and then the other part in the session itself to cut on the time itself.
Right, so we're doing things in more bite-sized chunks spread over a longer period of time. But that could be something that people like. I think, again, that goes back to what did I think were the difficulties selling the breakthrough session? It was this unheard of format, right? And some people can't even get away long enough from their family or their job.
Eric.
Yes.
Just it also, not that you have this problem anymore, but if you do discover in those early session that you're not going to be working with this client, right, for whatever reason, it's not going to be a fit, you still got the experience of doing that pre-frame work as many times as you possibly can. You're going to get better and better at it, right?
Absolutely. And even now, I've received a couple of little tips from people who are not NLPers, but who know sales. And I'll mention a couple of them, I think, later on, that at a higher price point, brought my conversion rate back up to where it used to be when it was at a lower price point. And that was very refreshing. because I do put a lot of time and energy into giving them a real semi-therapeutic and highly educational get acquainted call. And so there are little tweaks that you can make to just up the odds in your favor.
Beautiful.
Okay.
I would say two things to that. First, in my previous life before getting into coaching, when I hired a coach, the person that I hired after interviewing 5 was the person who I felt invested the most in me, like you're talking about right there in that session 0, where
Mhm.
I felt like they took the time to get to know who I was rather than just telling me about who they were and what they were going to do. And so
Right.
that I think is very valuable and probably should be kept in mind as we are presenting. The second
I
question.
tell you straight up, Angus, I could make a whole training just on session 0. In fact, to keep this shorter and less meandering, I deleted like 5 slides pertaining to session 0 as a deep dive,
Gotcha.
because it just would have been too much.
Sure. Going back to Lydia's question, do you assign any of the MER book for pre-reading as far like part of the ordeal or anything, or no?
If people are if people are amenable to reading,
Okay.
that's fine.
Okay.
You know, I have my own excuse me, resource packet, which is just a PDF with clickable bookmarks that automatically open up on the left-hand side. And they can go to things like the Matt's What is MER page on NLP.com, Dr. Patrick Scott's study of MER, clinical study, Matt's book, my book, the Amazon Pages show. Then there's like this whole presentation that we're doing today is compressed into an appendix in my book. And I call this Streamlined Breakthrough Session, the Change My Beliefs program in the book. And so that's there for people to review. And then there'll be some social proof stuff to round it out, plus and the lifetime service guarantee page from my site, all in this PDF. And it's all easy to look at. Oftentimes I'll share that with a client who may need to get a referral from a licensed mental health professional before they can work with me. And I'll say, share this with your mental health professionals so they know exactly what we're doing, when we're doing it, and why it works.
I suppose that the approach with assigning them to read or the that depends on the client
It does.
at the end of the day.
It really does. And I want to err on the side that people are busy and they don't have the time. And that if we could be ever more effective in our rapport building and sensory acuity and our salesmanship, and I'm not going to, feel any shame about using that word, then, they might not need to do the reading if that's not their natural inclination. And again, you never know. Maybe you can come up with a better ordeal or something that brings them into the practice.
Right.
But it's fine. Some people want to read, then you got to meet them where they're at. Any other questions?
I have one. This is Megan.
Yes. Who's speaking?
Megan, but I'm using Angus's audio.
Oh, okay.
How far back do you recommend them filling out, like if you were using a form to have them or email to collect the breakthrough session or the detailed history stuff? How far back do you ask for that information? Because I find that when I'm doing it, it's stirring up all the emotions and all the stuff. So if you have it like too far back, would they be disassociated with it by the time you have your session? Like, how do you manage that?
I wasn't going to cover it here. I do have like a framework for addressing that in my book. And it was like the idea being that if you're using the book in the same way that you would be meeting with me one-on-one, getting this result working through a book, of course, is a tall order. And nevertheless, I wanted them to have something that they could use to find the core identity belief. And so when you talk about how far back to go, I remember with a lot of clients they would remember recent things and couldn't remember further back things, which is to be expected. And so why not leverage that? Why not utilize that? And so there was, and I can't remember now because the book came out in 2018 and I don't have it handy here. But the idea was that there was these exercises they could do to find the emotionally charged events of recent times. And once they found those, they could go back to an earlier stage of life. And when I show you at a high level, the hypnotic regression or the hero's journey, because you've done master practice, it'll look familiar in certain ways. And it dovetails with what's in the book. But with the book, I'm having them work backwards and keep going further back.
It doesn't matter how.
When, what's that?
So I guess my question is, does it matter like if they look at their life and give you the answers to what you're asking, like a week before their breakthrough session with you?
Oh, that's what you mean.
Before, like, yeah.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. And when I share with you something called the 4 Qs, the Q means quadrants, you'll see that this is a clever little technique to really streamline the detailed personal history. And it'll force them to think of themselves as a whole person. And more importantly, it'll get them outside of story. A big thing about this program, and it's not really part of the scope of today's discussion, is that I do everything humanly possible to keep people out of their stories and focus.
Oh, we lost you.
Eric froze.
Yep, he froze. Can you hear us, Eric?
That could be an issue. Since he's the
There,
host.
now he's back. Now he's back. All right, we lost you for a minute. So I don't remember, what was he saying right before he froze?
You say you keep people out of their story.
Yes, you keep people out of the stories, which I think is huge.
Oh, yes. Yeah, it's my focus is to keep people out of their stories and focus on the methods we're using.
Yeah.
All right. And there's ways to promote or foster that. And that may come through in between the lines as we go here.
Gotcha. So
Okay.
It is 5 o'clock now, and I'm sure that everybody has questions, and I have many, but in the essence of trying to keep us on time, let's go ahead and see how many slides we can get through, Eric. And if we need
Okay.
to, we can have you back another time to finish up or answer more questions.
Sure. All right. So here's my own streamlined breakthrough session. It's got a session 0. And again, you can see there's a lot of child nodes that we're not showing in the mind map. But the first thing is to foster rapport, and then make sure that you give them the overview of the agenda so that you demonstrate you're the one driving the bus. They need that. They want to be able to rely on you. And then we're going to, in essence, do a de facto detailed personal history by helping them get from their surface UG to their deeper structure. And then we use NLP to promote the salesmanship. And then we're educating them about the differences between their conscious and unconscious minds, their identity belief as a hero's journey idea. This is getting them acquainted with a greater problem without calling it a greater problem. But I like to say, you know, if I go around believing I'm not good enough or I'm unlovable, what's the likelihood my life's going to get any better than it's already been? And they always say not good, slim to none. Everybody agrees with that. So now you've got them hooked into this idea that there really is a greater problem and it's going to affect their life's journey. And then there's some pre-framing. What are the requisites for change? What is mental and emotional release? Why is it a game changer? And we lay out each session's benefits so they know, okay, what is this program? What am I going to get out of it? And what's going to happen along the way? And then the results orientation comes back to this concept of the 4 Qs. The 4 quadrants. What do they want in their life, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically? And what do they do not want spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically? And that's what they submit to me before session 1. And that doesn't matter when they submit it, because some people are verbose and some people are cryptic, and it's never been a problem either way. We get whatever it is we need. It's mind-blowing how effective it is and how streamlined it is. And then, so then I'll make the offer to invest in the program and start doing this streamlined breakthrough session. Now, session one, you set the outcomes, and how I do that is, all right, they've submitted this 4Qs sheet. And these days it's all over Zoom and Google Docs. I invite them to the doc. I underline a handful of keywords. And I say to them, when these keywords get successfully addressed, do you think everything else you've submitted will fix itself? And when they say yes, they've established their priorities in their own words. That to me is about as much as we need. And we can keep the detailed personal history for the higher level offering. Now, the finding the greater problem is this combination of the hero's journey and regression. They go back to the day of their birth. I'm speaking to them in well-chosen generalities. Their unconscious mind will fill in the story details without them having to tell me the story. So you may remember from Master Prac training, the first period of this 4-act play that they're visualizing is the imprinting years. And then the second act is the modeling years. And the third act is the socialization years. And the fourth act is their business persona. And I have them come through all 4 acts of the play and then confer with their inner child of 5 to 7. And I ask them, what belief about self would you have to be holding for your journey to have played out as it has so far? What you're looking for is the belief that feels the worst and explains the most about your journey so far. It's got to do both. And we remember beliefs exist in clusters. So they may come up with a few of them, and I have a list I can rattle off, like, I'm not good enough, I'm unlovable, I'm bad, I'm broken, I'm invisible, I'm dumb, I'm dirty, I'm a loser, I'm weak, I'm a sinner, I'm not enough, I'm unworthy, and go on. And I'll say to them, I'll repeat it as many times as you want, and they'll pick a few. And we'll say, beliefs exist in clusters, like a cluster of planets orbiting a star in a solar system. We got planet beliefs, we got the star belief. And I help them figure out with this hypnotic coaching how to compare these beliefs and find the one that feels the worst and explains the most. This is what you're trying to get to with a 3-hour detailed personal history. Except this has now been made as streamlined and easy for them as I can make it, without them having to tell me stories and bum themselves out in the process. All right, so that's finding the greater problem. I've probably got a whole bunch of, I've probably spoken to these already.
Can you repeat that question? What belief would you have to leave?
Yes, what belief about self? You're conferring with your inner child, right? So 5 to 7-year-old. What belief about self would we have to be holding for our journey to have played out as it has so far? And what you're looking for is the belief that feels the worst and explains the most about the journey. And that's where we lead into the coaching process. And we're comparing beliefs. And again, I have that whole list of beliefs memorized, and I can rattle them off and help them figure out if they've got a collection of beliefs that they think the target is among. All right, and what we even do is help them figure out their system of beliefs. That's a whole nother discussion. But one of them is the star. And then maybe the belief that's the second runner-up is Mercury, because that's closest to the sun. And the second runner-up is Venus, and we can go on. All right, but that helps them get their system of beliefs. If we don't get the belief right in the first session, in the second session, they could revisit the system and move things around and be like, damn, that's it. Sometimes they need that first session plus some time out in the world to be able to put it all together. But another point I want to make here is that there can be, not for everybody, but for certain people, there could be a world of difference between I'm not good enough and I'm not enough. Every word matters. That's why I wrote the book, Change the One Belief, and the key word is one. Because that's why I said earlier, get the greater problem is more important than being amazing at MER, because it's the context for everything. Just like they said, what's the likelihood the belief holding I'm not good enough or I'm unlovable, my life will get any better, right? That's why it's so important to get it spot on. And we use color coding to mark their progress on this 4Q sheet. and I have them highlight in yellow anything that's improved, but they're not sure if they're all the way there yet. And they highlight in green anything that they know, heck, that's good to go. And this is preventing scope creep. And we review the 4 cues color codings together at the start and end of every session. So that's like going through your detailed personal history notes. And they can see one session to the next that they're making progress based on the color coding. And so again, in session 1, the intervention was to release anger and sadness. And then session 2, now these mind maps get real simple. You're going to mark your 4 cues tracking at the beginning and end of every session. So now they could see their progress in session 1. If the color codings hold, but we think we could do better, maybe we got to revisit the belief. If we're seeing more greens, then we know we're on the right track. And then, again, like I just described, they could revisit the belief and solar system and move things around and figure out where their system is really at. And then we can complete the intervention. We dump fear, hurt, guilt, the limiting belief decision, the anxiety, if they can still find it. And then we track their progress at the end of session 2. And I like to say to them, even at the end of session 1, this moment is as real as any other in your life. In other words, if they start thinking, but, oh, will this hold out in the real world? I'm going to say to them, you are in the real world. Right? That way you kind of head off at the pass, you preempt anything that would cause any unraveling. All right, so that's conversational hypnosis when you get right down to it. Now, session 3, again, same structure here. Start off with, they can see their progress in session 2. And now we would say, yeah, the color codings are improved. All the underlined items in the 4 cues should be green by now. And that's like, in essence, they've made peace with their past. That's something I pre-frame with them on session 0, is that when you complete these sessions, you will have made peace with your past. And that makes sense to people. That's something they can relate to. In session 3, though, this comes from a different school of NLP. You might notice that child node that says revamped Dilts 4-step belief change. So that comes from Robert Dilts. I learned it in 2015. And that was the genesis of what we're looking at here. It's done standing up. You're standing in 4 different locations. And I've completely revamped it to make it full of hypnotic language, full of NLP. And it is so much fun. People love this process. It is just a barrel of monkeys fun. And it does something with spatial anchoring. And then we finish off, once they got the new belief installed, you know from Prac, submodality belief change, the second half when you strengthen the good belief. And that's what we do there, to just lock it in place. And they've been pre-framed that that's going to happen back on the session 0 call when I described the program, well, session by session. And in my humble opinion, I do think this is a missing element from the breakthrough session as we come to understand it. So they lock in that new belief with the submodalities belief change as pre-framed in session 0. And then now we can track the progress of session 3. And now their breakthrough is broadening and deepening and more stuff is going green. Then session 4, again, the basic structure is the same. The middle seems complicated, but it's actually very simple because this is where we're probably having a lighthearted session and they're building on previous progress. And so the first thing you'll do is track the 4 cue sheet. Again, it's like going through your detailed personal history notes, but in their words. And now the theme with this middle section called Client Chooses is, I call it tools you can take with you. And you may have time to do more than one with them. And so what are those things? You could dissolve triggers. You could do collapse anchors and ring of power. You know, maybe your spouse gives you that certain look and you fly off the handle. Well, let's get that eliminated, you know, and collapse anchors is a great lead into ring of power because you could use the same 4 or 5 emotional states mapped over to ring of power and it speeds up the process. You could do SMART goals. right? That's the way we normally finish the breakthrough session. And then I call it practical tools, like if they don't know how to meditate, you could teach them how. If I could show them how to convert meditation into self-hypnosis and give them best practices for effective suggestions. Or we can do an anxiety release. You could break down MER into 3 other techniques: perceptual positions, reframing, and timeline, like where you could go further in the future and watch an event from now or the past get weakened and weaker in its intensity, right? So those are 3 elements that make up MER. You could break them down and give them separate tools, and they're simpler, easier tools for things maybe they want to do in the moment. Or you could, remember we said we could do the hypnosis, we could bring it in, or we could shave it out. It's up to us. Maybe we just do an old school, close your eyes, go deeper hypnosis, and, you know, seal everything in. Now, if you are a level 2 practitioner or above in Huna, you could lead them through Ho'oponopono, and that seems to be the most common thing I'm doing these days. And then again, get back to marking the progress, and pretty much everything is green. If it's not, it was either not relevant or we didn't move the needle on it, but typically they don't seem to care. Or maybe it's a physical issue, and, you know, I would need to get a doctor's referral before we address a medical hypnotic approach to something. So then when they complete session 4, I say, you're eligible for the lifetime service guarantee, right? They have to complete the program. If they don't complete the program, they're not eligible because maybe they had secondary gain. There are ways to get around that, of course. But they've earned it, and now they're entitled to it. And I don't mind doing a one-off session with somebody, but I won't do a one-off session with folks out of the blue. But if I've worked with them before, I'm perfectly fine with that. If it's not something that was in the 4 Qs, then maybe it's a new slate and they have to pay for that. And I think that's just all fair and reasonable. And so now, does anyone have any questions about the streamlined breakthrough session that I've been doing?
So many. I love it. First of all, my first question is, you sounded really excited when you talked about the revamped DILTs, 4-step belief change.
Oh, yeah.
Is that something that you have in your book that we can learn more, or is that something we can have you back to talk about more in detail?
I suppose we could talk about it more in detail. It was part of the program when the book came out, but the book doesn't like dig into it.
That's your book, or that's
really
the DILTs book?
Again, I think if you didn't have it, you could still do justice to the intent of session 3. You could still do the full deluxe submodalities belief change. I'm only using the second half of it once I finish Diltz's process. But on the other hand, you could do the full deluxe submodalities belief change to put in the new identity. Right now, instead of I'm not good enough or I'm unlovable, maybe they're I'm a badass or I'm a genius or I'm a goddess. Right. And we have a lot of fun with that.
So to be clear, when you were talking about the book, are you talking about your book or are you talking about the DILTs book?
My book doesn't really talk about the DILTs technique.
Okay.
All right. It is mentioned at a very high level that you're going to put in a new belief in session 3 for who you are now and where you want to go in life, not who you were at 7. And again, that's something I pre-frame in session 0.
That they've
Right?
made these decisions when they were 7 years old, and you were not in a good place to set those kind of frames at that age.
Yes, because the educational piece makes it very clear that the conscious mind doesn't arrive till 10. Right? So the kid formed the belief on the basis of the emotions. Right? No logic at all. Right? And so if there was enough at a low threshold of anger, sadness, fear, hurt, guilt, anxiety, shame, then those emotions play an oversized influence in the formation of that belief. Right? And then 3 years of it festering, and then the conscious mind arrives and still doesn't know it's there. That's why I bring in the hero's journey, because maybe the journey is to delete this belief from your psyche. Right? Some people would call that imposter syndrome. And that's really a big thing about what I do. I think this is all, when you get right down to it, it's funny. My book never talked about the words imposter syndrome. It didn't occur to me until after the book came out that that's really what this is, right? We're believing in something that's not true about ourselves, and we're unconsciously doing it, right? So the purpose of that regression, hero's journey, is to make that easy without them having to go into story and without having to take 3 hours. And then being able to coach them to make those comparisons at the emotional and the intellectual level. I mean, feels the worst and explains the most. The kid feels the worst and the adult explains the most. We want to get them harmonized, integrated, reunified. All right, so that's all been pre-framed at the outset. You know, and now come into session 3, it's usually a lighthearted session, and their 4 cues are proving to them in their own words that this is working out in the world. And that, okay, what's next, Eric? Okay, well, let's put in the new belief. And we just have a lot of fun doing it. All right, but you could still use the deluxe. When I say deluxe, you could, even with Diltz's one, I still have them address the old belief and knock out whatever juice it still may have left in it. It's usually very low, but there's just a little juice left. We clear that out, and in space 1, in space 2, they figure out what purpose did they hold the old belief. Space 3, there's a ton of processing there. It's hard to go into it here. Space 4, they declare their new belief to the world. And then they go back to space 1, and they cannot get the feelings of the old belief anymore. Then they come into space 2 and they realize the new belief will satisfy the desires that the old belief was trying to fulfill. And in space 3, it's about their life values. It's about their visions of the future. And all of that was utilized to find the new belief. And then they discovered that the new belief is compatible with their visions, and it's compatible with their life values. And then they come back and once again, declare your belief to the world. And then they'll declare it and they'll say, where is it at for you on a scale of 0 to 10? Oh, it's 7. I want you to get it to a 10 on 10. I don't care how you do it. That's personal style. Just get to a 10 on 10. Now, when I had my, I still have my physical office. I'm paying rent there, though I'm not using it. It was at ground level, and the back door of the office opened into like a backyard parking lot. I'll never forget. People just express this differently. I had this 50-year-old woman oncologist, and her belief was, I don't know why, but it's, I am a cloud. And it was a winter night. It was dark. It was cold. I opened, and they do the first 3 locations inside the office, but they do the 4th one outside the door, which is a way of passing through a portal. And now you're, unconsciously, and now you're declaring your belief to the world.
Utilization, buddy.
Right. And instead of declaring it right there outside the door, she ran into the parking lot on the asphalt, laid back on her back, and screamed up at the sky, I am a cloud. I'm telling you, this is so much fun. I don't care how some people are quiet and they go deep inside, and if as long as they assure me they're at a 10 on 10, then I say, okay, would you like to lock this belief in place? And they're like, yes. And then we'll go and do the submodalities reinforcement of the positive belief. And that locks it in place. And it's just a ball of fun, but you could do both parts of the submodality belief change and get the same job accomplished. It might be a very short session, but even with this one, it comes out to 45 minutes to an hour. But with submodalities belief change, it might even come out to be less. But I kind of like to bring in that belief, the submodalities, just as a kind of, put that record out of reach. No one's going to break that record kind of thing, right? Like, I'm not a football fan, but Tom Brady, how many Super Bowls? Is anyone ever going to catch up with that? That's kind of my thinking to kind of lock the new belief in place.
Right. Well, I want to be really cognizant of time. I know we are already 7 minutes over what we said we were going to do. So if anybody needs to jump off, we appreciate you joining us, and you have permission to leave. Not that you needed it, but thank you for joining us. Eric, I don't know what your time limits or constraints are.
I'm
Are
good.
open for
I'm good for
When
the
you get a
question.
when you get a second, yeah, pass the host back to me, and we'll see if people want to hang out and ask a few more questions. If you can, if
Okay,
you can
I'd
stay
like to
with
get
us.
this poll question in though, if we
Yeah.
could. And if people could put it in the chat, like a Y for yes. If you'd be interested in investing in the training that focused on how to deliver a streamlined breakthrough session where you cut your DPH time from 3 hours to 30 minutes, find the greater problem more reliably, and get back on track if you're somewhat off in a short period of time. Get some MER tips and tricks to make it more effective. I do it in a very hypnotic fashion, and it's using a ton of ambiguities and embedded commands and all that good stuff, plus hypnotic voicing. And then how do you prevent scope creep and still keep your clients incredibly happy? So if this would be of interest, if folks would be interested in such an offering, you know, I would put it together. I'm thinking about making this a certifiable offering. I would even open up to licensed practitioners. It might mean that I have to teach more NLP to set up the proper foundations. But that's something I'm looking at. And if folks have an interest, I'd be delighted to know if they do.
Looks like it was a resounding yes. Everyone who responded said yes. So I'm not sure if that was everybody. I'm not sure if everyone responded, but everyone that did respond said yes. So I think you should go over
There you
that.
go.
Big in.
So yeah, it's been a joy to share this with you guys. It was worth staying up late last night to get all the slides out of my head and onto print, so to speak.
Well, it was absolutely terrific. Let's see if you could pass host back to me. We will
Okay.
resume. A couple of questions for you if you have time. Do you have a few minutes to hang out?
Yeah, let me just see. How do I
So find me.
make host?
Yeah, make host.
Okay.
And next time, well, Angus can be the host too. That would be absolutely great. A couple of questions if you see in the things over there. Do you talk about the hero's journey in your book?
I don't remember. I'm trying to remember. I think
There you go.
it came to me right after.
I put that.
It came to me
Yeah,
right
I
after
put
the book
that.
came out.
And then Tracy Catherine asked, you know, if it's not necessarily in the book, would you include that in the training?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
great.
I would go deep into how you do session 0, you know, so that could be there could be different aspects, pre-framing and keeping it therapeutic, but also making it sales savvy.
Yeah,
you know,
perfect.
all of that would be there.
Great.
What else? But yeah, you know, how to do the DILTS process. I mean, anything that's in this, I don't need to keep secrets. I want, part of my reason is I want to do, well, you know what, if I can get to my last slide, actually, I'll show you. Oh, wait a minute, we got just a little bit left. This is a 1-slide thing. You have new alternatives now, all right? You could have a, in the existing format, if you don't have coaching, your breakthrough session is your one offering. If you do have coaching, you have 2 offerings. But if you go to a 4 to 5 session program on the full breakthrough session, you now have 3 levels, right? If you're a coach. And in my case, that someone asked if I would answer these questions. This is the answer. So entry level for me is the streamlined breakthrough session. I call it Change My Beliefs program in the book. And it's 4 sessions, not including session 0. The mid-level is a full breakthrough session. And that's the breakthrough session plus 3 coaching calls to make sure everything sticks and that they would be interested in building upon what they've accomplished. And then the high end would be the INLP coaching, which is the breakthrough session plus 6 months of coaching in that format, in that framework. And so, you know, this gets back to business model alternatives. It brings us full circle to where we began today's conversation.
Yeah, it's
Right.
terrific. And Eric, I know, and in speaking to you, you mentioned one time, you know, and you said a little while ago, there are thousands upon thousands of people out there who want these services. They want
Yes.
your help doing this. And so everybody can adopt a framework, a business model that makes sense for them and start, you know, doing what makes sense. And your
You could
expertise here has been terrific.
you could create like an offering that is just, I call it bust your cravings, right? And it's just like the dislike. That's how granular and modular we can get with this if we take it to an extreme.
Yeah.
So couple last things. First, Caitlin asked a question. Besides the hypnosis we learned at MasterPract, do we need any further training to successfully complete this model?
Well, that's why in the middle section here, I gave these other options without streamlining it, that you could break it up into 2 or 3 sittings. And then I showed the things that you could cut out. Now, I did say that you could get, if you can get fast at the detailed personal history, you know, you could still have like maybe a 6 session offering with a session, including the session 0, right? And you wouldn't need the things that I laid out in my own program. And in doing that, you will develop a skill to get through these detailed personal histories faster, and you have your remedies at hand, right? Now you know you can do anything that gets them into a better state before they leave your office, right? Like the dislike, perceptual positions, there's all kinds of things to kind of mitigate your risk.
So basically no other training, just more practice and trying to hone it down to make it more efficient.
Yes, and like again, my session 3, you could still do the full 2 halves of submodality belief change to get the new belief in. And I think, and again, it was given to us, but it was sort of an afterthought coming out of Prac.
Okay, can we go back to the question that 2 of us asked early on? Tell us cost-wise or packaging-wise, how did you start? What did you start your pricing at? And then kind of where have you grown to now that you're, you know, fully confident and doing this on a regular basis?
I don't remember where I started out with breakthrough sessions. It could have been like in the 1500. I remember like crossing 2000 and thinking, okay, finally that's you know, appropriate. But that's a long time ago. I think the 4-session program used to be, it was under 1,000 at one time. Now it's kind of like close to 2,000.
Okay.
And it's paid up front, and it's all, they book their 4 sessions at the end of that session 0 call, right?
Gotcha.
And so that way they can get optimal spacing of the sessions. And they're already committed and they've made their grand gesture to say, hey, this is an ordeal or this is a task and I'm in, right? And then I'll send them the paperwork and a link to the 4Qs webpage.
So
right? And you got to submit all that before session 1. And then when we meet at session 1, we're ready to hit the ground running.
Gotcha.
You know, all the administrative stuff is out of the way.
Right.
All right. The breakthrough session now is the full-on breakthrough session is 10K. And the coaching is 25K. And that's a new offering. I'll be honest, I haven't sold it yet, but I'm in the process of getting there. I've just closed some 10K breakthrough clients who fit this model of what I'm looking for in my new program, where I want to go much more into breakthrough sessions and high-end coaching. So it's called Rapid Mindset Makeovers for C-suite seekers. A little bit of a tongue twister. But I've got a guy who knows, he's a director at Google. And if he left Google, he could probably be a CEO anywhere else, but he's got some issues he's got to work through. And that's kind of what I'm looking to build out. And that's why the LinkedIn link. And all of this badass rising, to me, badass is the polar opposite of imposter syndrome. And so, you know, getting rid of your imposter and replacing it with your true badass. And I'll tell you, I've got in my back pocket one belief that if a person's stumped and they can't find a new belief that they think they can get really jazzed about, then I'll say, well, there's a word that happens to work equally well as an adjective or a noun, because the belief is of the form I am blank or I am a blank. And the word is badass. So if you say I am badass, that's an adjective. If you say I am a badass, well, that's a noun. And that just loosens things up. And some people use it, like 1 in 10 people will be like, I love it, I want it. And that will spur other people to figure out what they really do want.
Gotcha. Well, this is great. Eric, I do hope to work with you again, especially
Okay.
we look forward to hearing about the package that you've put out there that for your poll question. I'm sure you're going to have people that are interested in that. So please let us know and we'll definitely get the word out to the group. And then from there, I would love to have you back on to talk about some of these other topics that I know just from the sake of time, we had to kind of gloss over. But I really appreciate your time. Found it super valuable. I'm sure everybody else did as well. So we want to say thank you very much. And
My pleasure.
yeah, great.
Excellent, guys.
Thank you.
We'll see you guys next week.
Okay.
All
Ciao
right.
for now.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye.